stuff when it comes to trends and finding the trends for certain pitchers or hitters. That's what he's better at.
Yeah, I mean, like this year, we've come up with the ATC projections have interprojection volatility, which you'll see on Fangraphs shortly with a nice research article on why you might be interested in that. But I'll come up with this kind of thing. Just the ATC process of how to weight things and regressions. That's my deal with the math side. But of course, I'll listen to Ruvain about a specific player. Just because the ATC projections say something, we may not agree with it, and we'll do some. Not battling, we'll do some discussion and we go through every single player and we talk about is the ATC projection high, low, do we agree? Do we not have a strong opinion? Take the ATC projections word for word. So it's just about working with each other. Let's talk a little bit about splitting up tasks. So I always talk about during an auction with me and Ruvain, we each have very specific tasks that we're at hand. Ruvain keeps track of the closers. Ruvain is the one who suggests to me who should I nominate. He's looking at players that we think are economically going to be sound to nominate first. And we'll talk a little bit about this later in one of our episodes in terms of auction nominations, but it's important what order players come up in, and Ruvain keeps track of that. I'm keeping track of the statistical balance. I'm keeping track of what players would balance our categories more, which have lower variance, and who and how the price is dynamically select, all the math things. In an auction live, I'm the one doing the bidding. I'm the one saying it out loud. When we do it on a computer, Ruvain's the one doing the bidding. So we each have very specific tasks, and we don't have to talk about it beforehand. We know each other what to do. Do you have that with Glenn, and what would those be?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a pretty similar process. So, what we do is we do our own studying in, separately. And he writes copious notes by hand. And I plug things into the computer in different ways. And then we get together before we do our first draft of the season, and we go over every player. We go every relevant player we go over completely. But remember, our smart system makes us have to discount many of them. So when we're going to be discounting somebody because of one of the smart system rules, and we set a dollar value on every single player for AL only and for mixed. When we're setting those dollar values, when we're deciding what they are, the rules of engagement allow us to not talk a lot about players we're discounting. We discount them, we give them a discounted number, and we move along because we know we're not getting them.
Right.
So it allows us to spend less time on players that we're not going to get, and then come out with a targeted pool that's about 35 to 40% of the overall player pool. So we will have much less players to have that we're going to be involved in, depending on each draft, right? Then when we get together before each draft, depending on the strategy or the people that we're playing against or the types of rules that exist within that particular league, we'll adjust that. But generally, it only means adding 10 players in or taking 10 players out from the pool that we've created.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we do a similar thing in that, on this show, we don't talk about every shortstop. We just look at the players that ATC sees as a potential bargain. If ATC is looking at so far below the market value, we don't have to discuss it. There's no point. We're never going to buy that player, right? You want to use your time wisely. And we'll talk a little bit about time management a little bit later in the show. Ruvain, anything to add in terms of the tasks we split up to that discussion?
Well, we actually do categories. Like I'll look at you'll tell me it's time to look at the closer list, and I go through the closer list which closers I think we should target. I'll go over the injury stuff. I'll also do some of the prospect stuff. You're more the guy looking for trends in the market, looking to see, who's having a good spring training, that type of thing. And we just put it together and we go over, just like you do, we go over every single player. We go every single player, going through the ATC projections and seeing what looks right, what doesn't look right, why it doesn't look right, and then we jump into each one and we see whether or not they're a bargain. And by the time the drafting season starts, we should know every single player who is eligible, and we don't keep to that, just like you said, 35%. We look at everybody. There's a chance that we can own every single player. There's some players are higher on than others, but we don't go into a thing saying we have to have this guy or we have to have this guy. We have a group of players. We say this is the pool, but we're still willing to go out of that and to break the comfort level, because we'll have different plans set up for the draft. Like we'll say, if we get this guy at a good price, oh, you know what? Let's, we'll go into this direction to change the team. So we have to have different types of plans going into each draft.
Okay, and that's something we've changed just pretty recently. We changed back in 2014, I think, or 15. And we've been winning more championships because of it. Is we are now specifically figuring out who the exact targets of the players that we absolutely think that have the most upside, and it's all about upside. You need to have some players you're going to bank stats for, but bank them at either a bargain or at their regular price. But for guys that we think are going, it's their breakout year, and again, that 25-year-old thing has really hit, and Glenn is very good at figuring out which pitchers are going to pop. We just go get them now. And if it costs us $5 extra, $8, $10 extra, we don't care. We just go get the guys we know, or that from our experience are the guys who are going to explode, and we just go get them. And that just happened in the last 5 or 6 years that we started doing that, instead of being slaves to, oh, did we get a bargain on that guy, or did we get a bargain on that guy? No, we're going to go get that guy because he fits into the strategy that we built for this particular competition.
Very interesting, because we don't do that. We're more we're not tied 100% to the values, but we're much more towards that. We're very aware of what our figures say, and we aren't willing to spend $5-6 over just because we like somebody. I don't like anybody. I like pairs of players that I think we need X or Y or Z to fit our risk component makeup, that kind of thing. It's a risk management thing. I don't fall in love with any players. Now, Ruvain touched on what we split up in terms of the preseason, and I touched on what we split up in terms of the actual draft, but also during the season, we have tasks as well. So some people with Fab, some partners, it's one or the other, or they rotate. Like, I'll do it this week, you do it this week. Ruvain and I discuss Fab every single week. We go over exactly the Fab list we want to do. Ruvain keeps up a little bit more on the news. I'll keep a little bit more up on the numbers, the trends, who's hot, and, K-minus BB, that kind of thing. Do you guys have any tasks that you split up in the middle of the season?
Yeah, well, I mean, during the draft, we certainly split things up. He does all the bidding always. Why would you have a federal prosecutor who's a litigator who knows how to think on his feet fast and not use that strength?
Sure.
And then
Makes
I
sense.
figure out what strategies are going on, because I really feel like that's a real strength of mine. Like, if I can see, like, for instance, I believe that we won tout the first time, for the first AL tout, because I recognize it's an OBP league. I recognized that 2 teams were dumping OBP. So we just forced, when one of them was out, on those players to go another $1, and we squeezed dollars out of them until, and we made sure we OBP protected, and then we won OBP easily, and then, dominated the offensive categories in order to be able to win. But that's something in draft we literally noticed and changed our strategy completely. So, I like to do that part. Glenn does all the bidding. He figures out all that stuff. He does a lot of the end game. Like, we'll have $20 pitchers, and he'll decide which order they come out in. And I just don't keep score on that. Like, I'll be like, I like a guy better. He'll usually point to 2 with his fingers, this one or this one, and I'll go that one. But he's not. I'm not picking from the whole list. He's usually at the end. In the end game, he's much better at the pitchers. So I just don't keep score about that and say, great. In season, we have. You're either gonna love this or hate this because it's hilarious. We compete for who's going to go first. And whoever's day job frees up early enough for them to go get it before on the weekend, because we both work weekends pretty much, we go do the first run at it. And then we send them one at a time. We'll send one email for each league. And we have usually between 8 and 11 leagues in baseball and in football. And so once you start, it's like, oh crap, I'm going to go to the other end of the list and start. And so, because I don't want to be left out, but every once in a while, Glenn will send all the first shots, or I will send all the first shots, because just our day frees up. But after the first shot, then I have a list to look at. I know what he likes. I go look at it myself. I change the list. I send it back to him. And usually every league is 3 to 4 revisions. And if it gets to a 4th one, it's usually let's talk live.
Right.
And then we talk live about whichever ones we couldn't figure out in email. We figure out an email. Whoever writes the last one puts in the transactions.
Wow.
So it's very competitive, like, and intentionally competitive because that makes it fun, right? And part of our friendship is how competitive we are. I'll try to stick it to him on the air. I don't know if you noticed. If you notice, I stick it to him intentionally about things that he makes mistakes about because I know how perfect he likes to be, and he sticks it to me, whenever I make a joke that's not funny. So because he knows I'm trying to be funny. So we're just constantly sticking it to each other in the same way doing our transaction. It just makes everything more fun. Everything we do is actually more fun. Like when we're at the draft, when he's got a player that I like and he looks over to me and I give him a hand signal to go up another one, he'll look at me like, really, and then he'll go up one. So
Interesting. Interesting.
We're just having fun.
And it's funny because I find that I don't do that with Ruvain. I find that I don't have a competitive nature against him or so. That we're just doing it together, and maybe it's also because. It's interesting for me to hear that your on-air personality matches what you do offline. I would think maybe, because you're on the radio that you might want to, show that kind of personality, and maybe it isn't what you would do in person. But that's interesting to hear. I don't find that I have that with you, Ruvain. Do you agree?
But there are some times when you pick a player and you bid on somebody, and I said, no, don't do that. We don't want this guy. And I'm like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, and you know what? We make up for it because you're not picking a guy that we don't want most of the time. Right. Sometimes you put out a bid, then we get stuck with someone, but that really rarely happens. But there's one thing that I always preach at every single draft. What do we need more of? We need more power. You seem to always like to get the guys that have the stolen bases. I always keep saying, remember, don't forget the power. We need the power. I remember a couple of years ago, we wanted Rhys Hoskins. I said, we have to have him. We have to have him. We have to have him. We ended up losing him, but we got two other small power guys, so it made up for it. But still, there's some certain mantras that we say to each other. Say every day, every draft, we say the exact same things, and we're used to it already.
Yep, that's true. That's true. One thing I find, though, Rick, that when you have a partner, trading is a little bit tougher because if a trade comes in to me and Ruvain, I want us both to like the trade. There might be some trades that I would do on my own, and there might be some trades that Ruvain would do on his own. But for me, it's a veto scenario. If either one of us doesn't like the trade, we don't do it. So I think trading becomes a little bit harder, or there'll be less a frequent number of trades. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, and the way trades generally work for us, because Glenn is not much for trading, and he's also pretty tight on what he thinks we should and shouldn't accept, right? So generally, when we're looking for something, and I'll give you, here's a good example. We were pretty far behind in pitching, and we were winning in all the offensive categories in Labor NL, and we were in 2015, I think, and we needed to really make a jump. So I went to Glenn and I did some math and showed him that the math would work, and we did have a chance to make up like 13 or 14 points overall by dumping a whole bunch of power and turning it into Clayton Kershaw and I forget who the other big stud pitcher was, but we'd have to trade all of our significant power to do it. So he says, all right, well, go tell me what you mean. And so I put together a bunch of trades that I thought were good, and he sent them over. And then we did the math to make sure it would work out. And then we went to the guys and offered the trades. And they didn't accept them at first, and then we added more and we maneuvered around until we got them. And those trades ended up with us in the last week actually chasing a chance to win. And we lost by 2 stolen bases from Jake Lamb in the last weekend to Lenny Melnick.
Oh man.
So just a guy who doesn't run stole 2 bases.
Speedster Jake Lamb, yeah.
Yeah. The lamb beat the wolf. There you go.
Yeah.
So, but that's how it works for us. I basically do kind of all of the. Glenn says, "Hey, we got to trade because we need this," and then I go figure out the what. I give it back to him. He goes, "Nah," and he kind of maneuvers it around a little bit, and then we make the offers.
Right. Very interesting. I want to talk a little bit.
He always gets something else at the end. Like he goes, you know what? He's got this guy on, and he won't be able to bring him back up because, he has to activate him this week, and he's got an extra roster spot. So why don't we take whoever he's dropping? And then we end up with the player who's useful to us.
Very sneaky.
So he always finds that last little thing, which I don't look for. When I'm making a trade, I'm like, all right, let's get it done. But those little things help. That extra
Right.
save, that extra two steals. Those things.